This month's Where Did the Road Go is sponsored by Allison Cook, Lindsay Trebet, and Super Inframan. If you'd like to help support the show, you can do so at wheredidtheroadgo.com. And now our show.
Transmission start. Welcome to Where Did the Road Go? Join us as we wander off the path and explore lost history, consciousness, the paranormal, unexplained mysteries, alternative thought, and much more. We are present on the web at wheredidtheroadgo.com. Now here is your host, Seriah.
Welcome to this edition of Where Did the Road Go? Tonight I am joined by Cherylee Black.
Hi there.
And Wren Collier.
Hey, everyone.
And we're kind of doing an open format, wandering the road type of show like I did with Tim. We're just going to see where it goes. But right before, we actually stopped the conversation we were having before we recorded because we realized this would be an interesting conversation to start the show with. And Cherylee, do you want to start with what you were saying about the musicians?
No.
Okay.
I don't want to talk about that part on.
Okay.
Sorry.
All right. So where should we start?
Well, I can mention the thing about gifted programs.
Okay.
I mean, the basic idea is we were talking about how intelligence agencies or how the military may sort of catch people who have some sort of side talent at a critical junction, or kind of scooping them up early. And I was kind of openly wondering about gifted programs in schools. Like, I don't know the history of the gifted program. It was something I never really thought about when I was a kid and I was in gifted programs.
Yeah, me either.
Yeah, I mean, and it seems innocent, but the more I read Peter Levenda, the less innocent anything in the entire world seems. So honestly, I wonder, because is the idea, because we know from people like Strieber that young children were groomed for programs trying to determine if they had psi potential. I mean, in his case, it seemed like some sort of program that was trying to induce psi potential through trauma.
Right.
And, I believe him when he says, like, what happened to him because I've heard the same stories from other people as well. So,
really?
Yeah, I know I've heard at least one other, there was a lady. I think she was on your show, actually. I think she was on talking about some abduction experiences or something, but it said that in the past when she was a kid, she'd been sort of experimented on in that way.
I don't remember. I mean, it's entirely possible.
I might be getting podcasts mixed up. I'd have to go back and see what her name was. But it's something that I don't think is that unheard of, at least that there may have been some sort of program like that. And I mean, who really knows, because so much of MK Ultra is like an iceberg. We only know what's poking out of the very top because most of the stuff was shredded, and we still don't really know how far-reaching and what all went into those programs.
It seems to me the gifted and talented programs I were in were pretty innocent. I think I was put into them in the 4th grade, going into 5th grade, and we basically in between grades, they took us around. I lived on Long Island at the time, and showed us where the moraines were, that the glaciers dropped all the stuff, and just earth science stuff. And then when we went back to school, it was mostly just early computer stuff.
Yeah, it was sort of similar for myself. It was very much a lot of for us. It was a lot of arts type of road trips. We would go to the Shakespeare, the Alabama Shakespeare Theater, and see plays performed, or we'd go to the Atlanta Puppetry Center. It was a lot of things like that, and on the surface, that seems totally innocent. But I was just wondering, nobody at any point in the gifted program ever told us what it was for, why we were in the class, other than we got picked and scored well on some weird IQ test that they gave us.
Right.
It's just it's one of those things that it's it's probably innocent, but the more I think about it, the more I get that conspiratorial bug in my brain. I think, was there something more to this?
You guys must have been really well-behaved kids because I got expelled from the gifted program various times, and from school in general. I mean, was I 11 the first time I got expelled, and then it continued on
What were you
until
doing at 11 that you got expelled?
Yeah, really.
well, that was when poltergeist experiences started happening to me at school.
Oh, right.
Ooh,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, and at that point, they had me in for psychological or some sort. They never really explained it to my parents, but
Mhm.
one day a week I had to go for testing all day.
Huh.
And I know that they made films of me because when the lady left the room and there was a big mirror in the room that used to annoy me. And when she left the room, I turned off the light so I could see through where the camera was. Because I was sure it was there and I wanted to see it.
Nice.
So do
But,
you
you
think
know,
someone knew what was actually happening to you and they were trying to do research on it?
I don't know. I mean, I had one day a week of testing for a couple of years.
Hmm.
Like it was at least 3 years. And although, I was kind of they did IQ tests on my brothers, and I at that same time, like, I don't know, like, really, like, my brothers weren't in trouble in school, so there was no reason for them to be tested, but the school insisted that we all 3 be tested to see, what was wrong with us.
Mm.
Huh.
And, and we all scored quite high. Like, we weren't supposed to see our results, but when my parents were out on date night one night, we went and found them because we were surprised that I wasn't like, of the 3 of us. I'm the youngest, but my oldest brother was, like, way above average, but not weird.
Mhm.
And, you know, I was kind of the next one up and pretty weird. And then my middle brother, he scored off the charts and he never even finished school. Like, school was just a waste for him. He was so bored.
Mhm.
But
Well,
it's almost like the smarter you are, the more difficulty you have getting along in the world
Yeah.
is what I got from that. But but yeah, no, they hadn't, I wasted their time because they'd give me various tests and I would just think of the stupidest answers I could, you
Nice.
know,
see,
or they'd have some where you color in the dots, like,
Mhm.
that so that they can go through a computer thing. And I
mhm.
don't know how many I filled out so many of those things. And I just got to the point where I just draw pictures with the dots and just write things like this is really stupid, whatever. Like I didn't take it seriously at all because I just thought, "Oh god, like, I hate going here." All of my classmates think I'm like, there's something seriously wrong with me that I have to, spend every Wednesday and,
Yeah.
you know
Well, by
Mhm.
by the time I got to 6th grade, I was doing, like, ninth grade work, and at that point, they moved you from the elementary school to the junior high, and the junior high didn't have gifted classes. And they were like, "Well, you're gonna have to go to 7th grade because I was one of those people who since I was born in September, I was younger than most of the kids.
Yeah.
Like, I started kindergarten a little bit earlier, so they're like, "No, no, there's too much of an age difference. You're just gonna have to do 7th grade," and that's when the boredom kicked in for me.
Yeah. Yeah, and you managed not to get expelled because see, that was the other thing
Oh,
is
no, I got expelled for not going.
see, that's nothing. Getting expelled for not going. I mean, actually, I never got expelled for not going because I used to write notes for myself all the time so I could not go. Because my mom worked, and so both my parents worked, and my mom had her spare typewriter at home, so she always typed everything. She was like,
Mm.
executive. And so I used to type up a letter on her typewriter and I could sign her name. I used carbon paper until I got good enough to write her name you know, without it. Because you could use the carbon paper and then go over it with a felt pen and then erase the carbon.
Mm.
And that was how I that was how I could have days off when I really, really needed them.
Interesting.
Yeah.
But,
But
yeah,
no, if I got expelled, it was right from school.
And I think, and it's possible that some of the government looked into some of those programs. Who knows? I mean, like I said, there's nothing I can point to that was suspicious about the one I was in.
Hmm. Well, what's odd to me is the stark difference in, I think, the way the United States and, let's say, like Russia, like when it was still the USSR, handled this type of thing. Because in the US, the existence of it at all was like flatly denied by skeptics and scientists and stuff. And yet the government was still doing research on it, but it was more of a clandestine kind of thing where they weren't really, I mean, some people were talking openly about it. I mean, it was known that they were doing this research at SRI. But I just see that in like stark contrast to what I see happening in the USSR at the time, where the very existence of it isn't really like questioned by anyone. Everyone knows that it's a thing that exists, and the study of it is very open. And the fact that there are people who are like operational remote viewers, for example, are public knowledge. Like it was public knowledge that there were operational remote viewers on the front lines in Chechnya, for example. And they were utilized like in battle. It's just, it seems so different to the way it was handled in the U.S.
Yeah, I remember Joe McMoneagle was kind of surprised that they would send the remote viewers to the front line because they don't need to be there to remote view.
Yeah.
And the Russian remote viewer said, "Yeah, well, they just want us to be highly motivated."
Oh, that's very Russian.
Well, and we were talking about Joe. You said he did a TV show where he was finding missing people.
Yeah, it was a Japanese show. And yeah, they were finding missing people live on TV there. I mean, just extraordinary work as a remote viewer. He's very talented.
Yeah, in particular, I think there was one guy who was still alive, but he had changed his name. Like he basically like left his family and changed his name and was trying to remain hidden. And Joe McMoneagle was able to find him. And yeah, I think he was like doing it all remote. He was like at his home, I think in Virginia, and he was just kind of dialing in and doing it. But yeah, I mean, like people know about remote viewing protocol. He wasn't front loaded with any of this information at all. It's all blind targeting.
Interesting.
And, yeah, I mean, his results are astounding. So, he's been on several TV shows where he's done things that were pretty astonishing.
And what were the predictions he had made that you were reading earlier before we started?
Well, some of the predictions, and this is from Wikipedia. I have to look it up again real quick. But I think one of the predictions was that there would be a new religion that would supplant Christianity. That there would be like a science of the soul, a vaccine for AIDS, a movement to eliminate television, and a temporary tattoo craze that would replace the wearing of clothing. And it was supposed to take place between 2002 and 2006. But the thing is like, okay, there is actually, I mean, there's not a vaccine technically for AIDS, but there does exist now.
Good medications.
Yeah, and there's preventative medications. Like people who may be at risk of taking HIV, there's a drug that they can take that, as far as we know, prevents them from getting HIV.
Temporary tattoos is definitely a thing, but not as a replacement for clothing.
Yeah, that's an odd one because it's like I mean, and I can stretch around and try to make some of these like a movement to eliminate television. I'm like, well, actually, like
that's kind of happening.
Streaming services right now taking over traditional television. Like a lot of people have cut the cord in that regard, and I don't know. I don't want to try to stretch his words around too much and Nostradamus this into fitting what I wanted to believe, but I think Joe is one of those people that is like a great example, like especially his remote viewing work is a great example of someone that you can show people the research that was done on him and the research that he took part in, and say, like, here is the best proof I can provide you that remote viewing is a thing that exists and that you can do.
Yeah. And go ahead.
I'm saying, and anybody who actually tries to do remote viewing, quickly learns that it's a real thing too. Like I knew that remote viewing was a real thing from some experiments I had done with other people, but I'd always just assumed that I would be bad at it. I didn't base that in any sort of, fact or anything, just a hunch. And I've been in a remote viewing class, and it turns out that I'm actually not that bad at it.
Oh.
And the first time you really get hits, and like that you were blind to the target, and yet you still matched a bunch of elements of it, and the other people in your group also matched elements of it, and you know that they didn't know what the target was, like your mind changes real quick on it. It's hard to deny that.
And one of the things we had thrown around, you had come up with the idea of, as far as subjects for this show, would be the future of psi research, and then I would think that would be part of it.
Yeah, it's interesting because I was thinking about writing something up the other night, because I was reading through David Morehouse's book, and at the beginning of it, he has this whole thing about stuff to present to skeptics about remote viewing or something, like it doesn't work 100% of the time, and like all these caveats. But I got to thinking about that, and I was like, well, like these people who are skeptical, most of them aren't doing it in good faith anyway. Like,
right.
They don't. There's literally nothing that you could provide them that would make them change their mind on how they already feel about it. So if you know it exists, and you know it works, and all these other people know it works, and the government knows it works because they were funding research into it for decades, like, why bother trying to prove it to other people? Like, let's just move forward and leave those people in the past, and just like further the research and further the utilization of it and the operationalization of it.
Yeah. Cherylee?
Well, I was going to say, it kind of reminds me of Dean Radin's Show Me page, where he's got lists of articles of, different areas of parapsychological research where, if somebody tells you something skeptical, and you can say, but look at this, although, it's a nice idea. And I think it's a great resource just for anyone who's interested in psi research to see what's been done, but I don't think it convinces a skeptic. I don't.
And is it worth the energy? Like trying to convince a skeptic that this stuff exists? Like, I think that energy and that research or that work would better be utilized. By just working on the actual research itself. It's almost like you have to create a parallel science, and just go forward with it and keep working in it. Keep using the scientific method, like keep using controls and be an ethical scientist, but don't necessarily care so much about appearing respectable. And maybe I'm discounting in this the problem of funding for research. Maybe that's one reason they try to appear so respectable, so they can secure funding. But I don't know.
Yeah. And it's funny. It seems like a lot of the psi research has gone underground again. Like they really, like when you were saying about, let's talk about new research. Well, most of what you could find easily is stuff that was done in the 70s.
Yeah.
And stuff that's being done now, it's much harder to find. And it's almost like they're coming up with different names for it, so it doesn't look like it's psi research.
Really?
Interesting. Like how do they do that?
Well, Michael Persinger, before he passed away, was in charge of something called the Excess Correlation Project. And basically it was done so that they showed you how to build your own machine that would help to facilitate psi experiences. The idea
That's
that
interesting.
The machine would make you more psychic, and they wanted people to build these things, and so that they could collect data from, a bunch of different laboratories that try and replicate experiments that they've done.
Did that research ever go public? Like, did those plans and stuff ever go public for building machines?
I mean, they had a website. They were trying to. I mean, you can see how to build it. website is down, but the videos are still on YouTube showing you how to build it. And actually, if you go into the Wayback Machine, you can find, people thankfully backed up the website on that.
Yeah.
But yeah, there were like plans and videos and explanations on how to to build the machines. Yes.
That directly goes, as someone who recently bought a CNC machine, a 3D printer, and a bunch of Raspberry Pis. That is right up my alley. So I'm going to need to try to build one of these, because I was actually looking. I was reading Anthony Peake's book on astral travel, and in the very opening, he talks about the Lucia number 3 light machine that is supposed to induce out-of-body experiences. There's also apparently one on the market called the Pandora Star. But both of these machines are thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. I think I think a Pandora Star is like 10 grand. Lucia is even more. And when I was looking at them, I was like, this is equipment that shouldn't be that difficult to make. Like, sure, I won't have the research and the patterns and stuff that they have done research on to induce these experiences, but the actual hardware itself, I could easily build this for less than $100. It's just LEDs, a halogen bulb, and like a Raspberry Pi to do the control of the LEDs or something in programming.
Well, you have to know how to do it too.
Yeah, but that's the thing. It's not. There's plenty of guides in setting up LED matrices and stuff online. It's like I could build this and then release the plans open source to the internet and say, hey, everybody build this thing, and then let's play with different frequencies and light patterns until we figure out the ones that work.
I was going to say, my understanding is that not only are there instructions on how to build this that were made public by Persinger and his people, but even parts lists, so you could order everything on Amazon cheaply.
Heck yeah.
Really?
They tried to make it so that it would be as easy to put together and as economical to put together, so that any any grad student with a small budget could just whip one of these things up if they wanted to experiment. So I'm sure you could do it.
Yeah, that's so awesome. Yeah.
So yes, no, I'd be happy to share with you the links that I've still got. So
okay, yeah. That what do you think about that? The idea of crowdsourcing this type of research, especially with like technology that is supposed to enhance these experiences, like getting them into the hands of other people and then them having them report data back to you.
I don't like crowdsourcing. You mean in term, like not funding, but in terms of just getting other people to try the experiments and get back?
Exactly, because I think a lot of sci experiments can be done cheaply. They don't necessarily require very expensive equipment, but I feel like there isn't a good enough central repository for experimental data from people actually can report these things back. I guess the closest thing I can think to an example of this would be Hal Puthoff's like ESP Trainer app for the iPhone and for phones, where you can.
Oh, Russell Targ's.
Oh, that's Targ's. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, Russell Targ. I gave someone else credit for your thing. But yeah, so that ESP Trainer, I think that's a super cool idea, right? Because then you can get this out to other people. I think like maybe that is the future of this type of research.
Yeah, well, and Dean Radin did some participatory online experiments with his double slit experiment.
Oh, right. Mm-hmm.
Where you could log on and try and influence the machine, and it would give you your results, and then that would just be put into all the data that was collected, and so they had, which was nice because that way they could actually see if the effect attenuated over distance, because you had to put in your location. And they found out that it didn't really matter where you were in the world.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, that would make sense given, remote viewing experiences.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right? There doesn't seem to be any travel time.
Yeah. But, just the fact that they've found a way to quantify that and get evidence for it is great.
Mm-hmm.
And there's, I don't know if you've ever seen that Got Sci website that's kind of different tests you can play with.
No.
Oh, no, I haven't seen that. That's something to check out.
That was originally done by the Boundary Institute, and then it was taken over by, I Dean Radin was involved with it. I think the original fellow who set it up had passed away. But you can kind of do your own little statistics. But I think that they had actually made it to try and collect statistics so that they could kind of look at patterns in it. You know, so that's another one that one's really, it's fun to play with, you know. And I mean, that's the point. If it's not fun, you're not going to do well.
Yeah.
Right.
You know,
well, that was the thing that they ran into with Ingo Swann, right? The whole reason he did the remote viewing of he saw the rings of Jupiter was because he was really bored by all the stupid experiments they were having him do. And he was like, I want to do something fun.
Yeah, because originally they were just asking him to remote view what's in the box. And he's like, well, if you want to know what's in the box, open the box.
Yeah.
You know, like, come on. You know, which I get. You know, I do. You know, and it is difficult to keep experiments interesting. And I mean, sometimes I also find that even with serious down to earth parapsychologists who actually, you know, are looking for evidence of psi, sometimes when they find it, they totally back off.
They get scared of it, or yeah.
I think so. Like something just happens, and they just kind of, it's like their mind just ignores it. It's like I think I'll just be interested in something else now, and they'll just and you ask them about it. It's like, oh no, it didn't scare me or anything. My interest just went elsewhere suddenly.
Yeah, that happens.
But it happens repeatedly. Like I've seen that over and over. Like that's why I kind of gave.
Lost you there.
Although I've volunteered my time and any remote experiments. I love remote experiments. I'm quite happy to sit on Skype and do remote experiments for people. But I don't know. It's like as soon as they get a result that looks interesting, they just completely, you never hear from them again. It's weird.
I lost you there for the beginning of that sentence. That's why you don't what?
Oh, okay. Oops. Is my computer still working? Hello.
I can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, that's why I don't really go out of my way to work with a lot of parapsychologists because I find that, you'll get started and then they'll just kind of back off or lose interest or just, I don't know, like something just happens and they just don't want to do it anymore.
I'm actually guilty of that myself. When I did and some people who are going to be listening to this probably were part of this experiment, but I did like a remote viewing experiment with a group of about 20 people, and the results from the first 2 sessions were so impressive that I'd planned to do maybe 10 of them, and I sort of just stopped at that point because I was like, oh well, this sufficiently proves to me that this is a thing that exists. So I don't know. I'm hoping I've learned a lot since then, so I'm hoping to maybe get back together with some of those people now that I have a little better handle on what I'm doing based on the class I'm currently taking. Yeah. But we'll see. But
you know what happens when you do those experiments? Because I've done like a bunch of different experiments, myself, and I actually got like one paper published at the Parapsychological Association, and basically what I found is that there's like this beginner's luck where the first little bit you get great results and then it tanks. Yeah. And you think that's terrible. It's never going to come back. But what happens is it does. If you persist, then all of a sudden it starts working a little better and a little better and a little better. And eventually you get right back to where you were at the beginning. But you really have to be, stubborn and stick with it because most people quit as soon as it tanks.
There's a lot of pressure in it. I'm going through that right now because my first like 3 sessions were like I just knocked it like completely out of the park, like right on target. And I was like, okay, well, I know that I can't just keep going like this forever. Nobody's that good. So but then this pressure starts to build inside you where it's like you don't even want to do the next experiment because you just know that you're going to bomb.
Yeah.
And you're going to embarrass yourself.
Yeah.
Even though there's no stakes at all, it's not like I'm being tested or like there's any money or anything at stake here. But it's just like you don't want to fail. Like the human urge to not want to fail is like so strong and manipulative. And you're right in that I just have to keep going. And I did have one session after that yeah, I totally was like completely off track. So maybe that reset me. But it creates almost a nervousness in yourself doing it. Because you just become increasingly scared of just bombing. Like, did you ever go through that in experiments that you did where it was like you get so anxious that you're just going to bomb something, or did you ever really care?
Well, okay. The reason that it was different for me is that when I first started doing those experiments is that I knew that there was that thing where it would work at first and then it would stop, and that the best way to kill psychic experiences was to experiment and try and prove they were real. And I was trying to make it go away. So that was my whole goal, is that I was going to kill the poltergeist. You know, I was going to make that poltergeist just go away by doing the poltergeist, the PK experiments, and I was just going to cure myself of PK that way. And I got really, like, when it first started tanking, I was like ecstatic. It's like, I've done it. And I'm going to just keep going, and it's never going to come back. And it came back. So it was a little different for me that way, because I was really trying to cure myself of it. And that's why I was quite happy when it tanked, and I didn't feel the need to stop at that point.
You know, Seriah, it sort of reminds me of what Crowley talks about with the lust of result.
Oh, yeah.
I think a lot of people read that into that thinking that means, after you do, in this context, like a ritual or a spell or sigil or something, you shouldn't worry or think about the result, or because that might mess it up. I think maybe what it really means, and this bears out in my own psychic stuff that I've been doing, is that the more you worry about the result, like the more you're going to drive yourself crazy. And that maybe you just have to think, you know what, it doesn't matter if I bomb. Like, there's nothing at stake here. Nobody's going to die. Nobody's going to care. And I just need to, like, whatever happens, just let it happen.
I think part of that too, though, is a matter of letting those symbols, that ritual, go down to your unconscious mind, where things actually happen. Because we don't change.
Worrying about it is gonna block that process.
Right. Exactly. That's why you just want to forget about it, walk away. Because if you don't, it remains in your conscious mind. And if you want to change stuff with your conscious mind, you can do that by physically moving things or whatever. But if you're looking for a magical result, that's going to happen on the unconscious level or the subconscious level, whatever you want to call it, a deeper level of consciousness.
Okay, I have a question.
Yeah.
Okay, so you know that there's that new program about Skinwalker Ranch that's starting up this week?
Yeah.
I have to wait another week for it. Apparently it comes out later in Canada. But anyway,
of course.
And so now they have a live stream video where you can actually look at Skinwalker Ranch on YouTube. Now my thought is this an experiment that they're not telling us about?
Probably.
Because like, that was my first thought, was like, okay, this is an interactive phenomena. Is it going to interact with the, like, because I looked at the video. I mean, there was like 2,000 people watching it. And it's like, are the consciousnesses of 2,000 people paying attention to the ranch, are they going to have any effect there? Like, and was that the reason why they decided to bring so much attention to it right now?
It's possible. I mean, it would be interesting if it does do something. I think a lot of that would be based around what these people are expecting to see. Like, I don't know if are y'all familiar with Jackson Hole, Montana?
No.
Yeah.
Okay, so do you know about, like, the Jackson Hole webcams, Cherylee?
No. Is that why? Are they trying to get jackalopes or something?
No, so for months it was like this YouTube phenomena, right? Like, Jackson Hole, the town of Jackson Hole had all of these, like, webcams set up live streaming to YouTube, like of like the town square, like different places in town, and just people just started congregating there. There would be thousands and thousands of people just sitting in like the Welcome to Jackson Hole like town square webcam live feed, and just like chatting and like making a big deal about every little small thing that would happen. There started to become this whole narrative where like there was this one particular truck that would always appear around the same time every day, and everyone would be like waiting for that truck to drive by. And it's so odd, and it makes me wonder if like that's what it reminds me of. But it's like in that sense, the people watching this Jackson Hole feed didn't have any expectations about what they wanted to see really, other than just the novelty of looking at this weird small town. So I wonder if that same energy applied to a bunch of people expecting to see something paranormal happen is going to affect the live feed from Skinwalker Ranch.
I almost feel like the phenomena will avoid direct attention like that, though.
I mean, probably. The thing is with Skinwalker, too, it's hard to say. I think you were hinting at this, Cherylee, about there's all of these sort of theories being floated around that Skinwalker Ranch was some sort of operation from the very beginning.
Weapons testing, yeah.
Yeah, testing psychological weapons or testing biological weapons. And, you know, we know there's that connection to Bigelow Aerospace, which has connections back to the intelligence community. And it becomes this, like, tainted pool thing where I'm like, I can't really trust anything that comes out of it, and I don't trust the intentions behind the live stream, you know?
Yeah. Well, especially when they're pushing a TV show.
Yeah.
There is that, but you know, I have to say that just the experimenter in me is like, you know, you've got this phenomena that seems to be interactive, and it's interactive on level of consciousness. What happens if you focus lots of consciousnesses at it? Will it, you know, how will it react? Will the phenomena like disappear? Will it go underground? Will it wait till the cameras are off and then do nasty things to the people who are at work there? Like, what will it do?
Yeah.
Will it escape via the internet to people's homes?
You know, I just thought about that when you were saying that. The contagion aspect could be interesting. Like, I wonder people who watch that live stream, and this is the kind of data that I would want to collect. If you're watching the live stream of it, do your dreams suddenly change? Do your dreams get interesting all of a sudden? Are other people having the same dreams that you are?
Yeah.
I think looking at ways it may subconsciously influence people who are observing it might be really fruitful. Of course, too, that might be the point of getting people to watch it in the first place.
Yeah. Like, I mean, I realize it's a marketing tool for a TV show, but on the other hand, it could be more.
Yeah.
You know? And really, it's kind of like, what was that? Like Slender Man, where, you know, it sort of became real just because people treated it like it was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know?
That makes me wonder, Cherylee, are you familiar? Okay, so we know I've never seen any PK experiments, like moving windmills or anything like that ever involved like multiple people focusing on it. Do you know of any experiments in which there were like sort of to see if like PK could be compounded or increased with multiple participants?
There's some that were actually, I think they're occasionally done, because I occasionally get an email for it. There's somebody in California, a grad student, I believe, who was doing stuff with weather phenomena, where he would get people to try and influence the weather. And he wanted like large groups of people to try and like cloud, like, you know, create clouds and rain.
Yeah.
And so that was one that used more. I don't know what the results were for that. There's also the Global Consciousness Project. That, of course, is, you know, many people. I think in Russia, like there's like a school there for teaching how to do PK. And I believe that they do some of the stuff where it's a group of people trying to move an object in the middle of the room.
So is that research still pretty mainstream in Russia?
I'm not sure how mainstream it is. I know there's an institute because a friend of mine has gone there. Like I know a number of people because I was contacted about some PK experiments a while ago, and I didn't want to fly even back then. I never liked flying, but you know,
Right.
Yeah.
but I know like they were going to Russia and they were doing all this stuff. I don't know, their PK experiments I don't think worked that well. Although I guess I don't know. I think that they should have just stayed home and done it remotely the way I was happy to do it. Because I think it's better evidence that way because they can't say you did anything because you weren't there to do it.
Yeah, there's no sleight of hand involved with
there's no sleight of
webcam.
Yeah, that's right. There's no sleight of hand. There's not, peeking through the air shaft to see what's in the other room kind of thing that, some of the remote viewers were accused of. Like there's none of that. Oh yeah. Yeah. So I mean, I personally, and I just don't think that distance really should
make a difference.
Yeah. I mean, it kind of does psychologically, but still, I think that you just need to give it enough time. And I mean, unfortunately, no one I've worked with has ever, once you get some initial stuff that looks kind of cool, they always seem to lose interest at that point.
I don't know, this is kind of making me want to just like set up a webcam on like a windmill or something underneath glass and just live stream it and just have people try to log on and move it.
Yeah.
And just see if like more people equals higher effect or if it seems to affect it at all.
Well, of course, Jeff Ritzman also set up the cameras all over his house while weird stuff was happening, and nothing weird ever happened on the cameras.
Well, I honestly think that this stuff has some co-creative element with the human mind, and I don't know if you could capture it on a camera.
Well, when I first started, like, spinning wheels inside jars, the hardest thing to do was to get it on video. And once I did it once, even just a little bit, after that, no problem. Like it was like once you capture it once on video, then suddenly it's like, okay, I've been caught. Nothing to hide here now.
Yeah.
It keeps working, but it was so hard to get the first, and I could do it without the camera on, no problem. And same with doing it in front of other people. That was a real challenge,
But that's coming from you, not something like other.
I think there was other involved too.
Really?
Oh yeah. Part of it was me, but I think part of it is also other.
Why?
Because it does seem like it's not just you. Like there's something else that you're connecting with when that happens. It's hard to explain because I know when I first started doing it, I tended to think, oh, it's just me, because that's how parapsychologists normally frame it.
Right.
Yeah.
Even with things like, seances and spiritualism, it's like the idea is that, you can place the blame on the ghost, but it's really you doing it.
Yeah. This complete
and
psychological model of it.
Yeah, I mean, that's how they look at all of PK is that it's, it's the person doing it and there's nothing else. But I think it just seems like when I'm doing it, it really seems like there's something else there. And it's the same as, if I were doing it in a room by myself or if several people walked in the room, it would feel different to me. Like if you're sitting in a room by yourself and somebody walks in the room, you feel that. You feel the change.
But couldn't it be that that's something else is a part of you you're not familiar with?
I don't know. It could be, but it seems very different and apart sometimes.
Okay.
Let me ask this. Does it feel like the same thing each time you do it? because I'm taking the stance more that it could be something external to you, because that, I have a spirit model in the way I look at the world, so that makes total sense to me.
I would say that generally when I sit down with the jar and the pinwheel and do it, that kind of builds up a familiarity over time. But
Mhm.
then if other things happen, like sometimes if there's poltergeist activity, like if a book shoots off the shelf,
Mhm.
those don't always feel the same to me.
Okay.
Like it's like somebody else has thrown it. Like, I don't know how exactly to explain it, but there's sometimes where you feel like it's a familiar thing you're dealing with, and sometimes it doesn't feel like a familiar thing you're dealing with.
So you could call this, a spirit model or whatever, but this idea that not all of these experiences are completely internal or completely emanating from the individual. Do you think the ignorance isn't the right word, but like the ignoring that possibility is hamstringing some researchers who are looking into this stuff?
Yeah. Yes. I think it does. Because I think, it's like when you should try and get the pinwheel to spin, you have to make friends with it. So I've always tried to explain it.
Oh, that's really fascinating.
Like you have to make
Yeah.
friends with it and earn its trust and develop a relationship with it.
So you're treating it almost like a pet.
Yeah.
That's very animist. I mean, you're basically like giving the pinwheel like personhood, and you're saying, it's not me making you spin; it's you spinning for me.
Yeah. And that seems to work. Whereas trying to like
manipulate it.
Yeah, manipulate it or energize it or whatever, that approach doesn't seem to work.
Interesting. I mean, every time I have poltergeist activity, I treat it like it's an other, but I don't necessarily believe it is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's just that I know I didn't consciously do it, so it might as well be an other.
Well, and sometimes I do think it's me. Like, and like my husband will, if the light goes off, he'll say, "Okay, what's wrong?" And I'm like, if I want to talk about it, the light wouldn't have gone off.
I think about this, Seriah, with like spirit conjuration, like the kind of stuff I do. I don't think that you may be able to conjure a spirit to visible appearance in the sense that you can see it with your physical eyes, or at least what you perceive to be your physical eyes, but not in your mind, not in your mind's eye, not in your imagination, but as if they were really standing there in front of you. Maybe they appear in a mirror, or maybe they appear like in a cloud of smoke or something in the incense you're burning, but it looks physically there. I still don't think that if you had a camera trained on it, that the camera would pick up anything. Because I think ultimately what you're seeing is being sort of projected just for you. But then again, I've also heard reports of experiences like this in which multiple people see the apparition. And in that case,
Right.
well, what's going on? Would a camera catch it then? Or is it something that requires a consciousness to perceive?
And I wonder that about a lot of this stuff. Like, does any of this stuff happen when there's no one to perceive it? Like a haunted house, do things do ghosts still haunt the house if there's no one there?
Well, if there's cameras there, they often pick things up, though.
Right, but then that's sort of like someone being there.
Yeah, that is. You're right.
When I had Albert Taylor on, he was I tried to get him to come back on, but he turned me down. I don't think he's all that interested in this stuff anymore. He was building robots to go out ghost hunting. So instead of, going to a house for one night, he'd have these little drone robots walk around the house for weeks and try and interact with whatever was there. And he was getting stuff that way. No one was monitoring them. So the only consciousness that was there was that of the little robot.
What kind of stuff was he getting?
I don't remember. It's been a long time since I did that interview, but I was kind of surprised that he found that he was getting anything without people there, you know?
Hmm.
And I don't know what that says about it all, really, when it comes down to it.
Yeah.
Because again, at some point, someone's looking at that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's some observation that occurs.
Yeah, and as soon as you observe that changes everything. Like there was PK experiments. Oh, I'm trying to think of the name of the fellow who did it, but what he did was he had people influence sort of the left click, right click on a machine. But what he did to really make it weird for them, well, without telling them, is that he would record these results before he had them do the experiments, and it still worked. Yeah. Huh. So they would actually do the experiment and not look at the results. And then they would have people in there trying to influence the results and getting it to work. And yet it was recorded, a couple days prior.
But it still matched up.
It still matched up.
Robert Schoch talked about some of those type of researches in his book talking about the solar flares. I don't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but he talked about some different type of research that was going, including stuff like that, like people who, what was it? It was something about testing. Like if people were convinced that they would do really well on a test, even if they didn't study, they tended to do better on the test.
Okay, that was Daryl Bem's work.
Okay, that was Bem. All right.
Yeah, that was Daryl Bem, because it was sort of the retro
causality.
Yeah, where you're right, where they give you a test and you study after the test, and studying after the test makes you do better on the test.
Which makes no damn sense at all, but he got pretty consistent results with it.
Yeah.
So what the hell's going on there?
I mean, it makes perfect sense if you think about it in the context of, say, associative remote viewing, where it's a very similar setup in which you remote view the outcome of some binary event. Either this will happen or that will happen. You associate an image to each outcome, and then you have a person, you have your your team or your person remote view the outcome. You match up whatever image they end up getting closest to and making your bets based on that. And when the actual outcome occurs, you then show the viewer their feedback, which will be the image associated with whatever outcome actually happened in the real world. With the idea being that you then set up some sort of retro-causal information transfer to their past selves in order to give them the information that they need to predict the event. I think a lot of like magic in particular is retro-causal in nature. It's either retro-causal or it's like bootstrap paradox kind of thing, where you create effect without cause.
Okay. Well, it also could be that our ideas about time are completely wrong too.
Yeah. I mean, I think it goes without saying that we may perceive time in a linear fashion, but that's not necessarily how time is limited.
Yeah.
We're just kind of stuck in our perception of it moving in a straight line, but in reality, it can move all around, and things that happen in the future can influence things that happen in the past, and it's I don't know. It's hard to think about because we only experience time in that sort of straight arrow.
Right.
Unless you have an NDE. Then.
Yeah.
And then you're cheating.
Perhaps.
But there's got to be some limit to that effect too, though, right? Because, like, all of a sudden, well, I don't know. Maybe it's like it's almost like it goes into weird territory because it almost ends up being like a destiny, fate kind of thing. Because it's like, I was about to say, I can't just start speaking Mandarin Chinese right now, because at some point in the future, I'm going to diligently study Mandarin Chinese. But maybe all that means is I don't ever actually diligently study Mandarin Chinese, and that's why I
Right,
can't speak it right
exactly.
now. No matter what, I never actually do that. So
And then because you can't speak it right now, you go, well, I guess I'm never going to do that.
yeah.
And that is one of those things. Like, is there free will? Do we have choices? I feel like we do, but I also feel like there's certain things that are going to happen. That certain things that need to happen. And I don't think we can necessarily avoid them. We can just change how we deal with them when they happen.
Yeah, I've thought about this a lot, and honestly, I don't have an answer either way. I don't know if such a thing as free will exists, but I can say that there is certainly the illusion of free will.
Yes.
And so the only way to really live your life and exist in this world is to operate under the illusion of free will. Like if you just go your whole life thinking everything is preordained, it's just going to lead to like fatalism, I think. And also too, it in some cases it can cause people to sort of shirk their own responsibilities. Where they think, well, it's not my fault this happened. It was just meant to happen.
Right.
And in some cases that may be true, but it's like you don't have the luxury of living as if like free will wasn't a thing. You kind of just have to live your life under that illusion.
And it doesn't really matter because we don't know what's coming.
Yeah.
So, the illusion is the same as the real. I mean, reality itself is an illusion. It doesn't stop us from stubbing our toe on a table,
Yeah. Maybe one day we'll fly up above the forest and we can see the trees. And we'll know everything in the future and everything in the past. We'll say, oh, okay, well, this was always meant to be, and there was no such thing as free will. But right now we don't live in that world, and we don't live in that existence. So you've got to still get up in the morning and go to work and brush your teeth, and
right.
It's fun to think about, but it's like you can't really live your life that way.
But what if that is where your life was supposed to go, where you just stop?
Yep.
It's one of those impossible questions because what we need is the ability to redo.
Mm-hmm.
Like in a on a computer or a video game where you can say, all right, I don't like that outcome. What if we go back and do it differently?
You may already do that and just not even realize it.
That's also true. Yeah.
I've thought about that recently about what if every person's subjective experience of life is the experience of a life in which they succeeded or like didn't die, you know, or didn't die until they were old or whatever. I guess I'll be wrong if I get struck by a car and die tomorrow. Then I was wrong in this idea.
But maybe that's the longest you were ever going to exist.
Possibly. It's also too, I kind of, while I've played with this idea, I haven't really ever gone whole hog with it because on one hand it seems very solipsistic because it's kind of like saying that I'm the protagonist of my experience, right, and everyone else is like
a non-player character.
Yeah, I didn't want to say non-player character, but yeah, basically everybody else is an NPC, and that's, I don't know, that leads to some nasty stuff in its own right, that kind of thinking. So I've kind of backed off from that, but it's really just this idea of like quantum immortality, which I think people can read up on, and kind of I've played with this idea. That your subjective experience is a subjective experience of like your best possible life, or a life in which all these accidents didn't happen or something. Because it makes me think about people with like precognition of like some kind of impending disaster in which they are able to avoid it and change the outcome. And it makes me wonder if during that experience, or is the whole reason they had that precognitive vision of like, say, getting T-boned in an intersection, is it because that really happened to them and they died and they got reset back and they just still had the memory of that? Or maybe it happened to their self in a like parallel world. Like if the multi-world thing holds up, and there are, let's say, like parallel universes, like in the TV show Sliders or something. Maybe you can share memories between parallel versions of yourself.
Yeah, and I mean, and that's an idea that Seth floats out there too.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
That you can share information not just with your parallel selves, but with past and future lives.
Mm.
And I always treated that like, okay, so if you're playing a video game and you have different games going on in the same game,
Mm-hmm.
your higher self is sort of learning from one
Mm-hmm.
character, and then when you go to play the next character, it's bringing that knowledge over with it.
Yeah, and that makes sense. I mean, that's sort of similar to Robert Monroe's experiences, especially what he writes about in Ultimate Journey. This idea that all of your past and future selves sort of are always existing on some level and attempting to help you, and you're trying to help some of your past and future selves, and that you all kind of exist simultaneously.
Yeah. Because time is not really a thing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, maybe not here, but now. It's always now.
It's always now, yes. And is so when you've had near-death experiences, Cherylee, is there any way to express what it's like time-wise there?
No.
Okay.
No, I mean, but it's just, it's what you call like timelessness. It's like it's like everything is kind of all at once, but yet at the same time you can kind of give a narration of what happened, like a story to what of your NDE, because most NDEers can do that. They'll go, okay, well, I went through this tunnel and saw this light and did this and this, like it's an orderly fashion, but it doesn't really seem like an orderly fashion when you're there.
Does the orderly fashion kick back in like when you process it here?
Yeah. Yeah, it becomes like you translate it into a linear experience when you get back here.
I guess you'd have to.
Well, you can't really explain it. Like, I mean, there are no words, like, and there's just so little you can convey of it. And I think that, it's really hard even to make sense of it here.
That makes sense. Because it's like a totally different level of consciousness, wouldn't you say?
Yeah. It would be like if the whole world was in this dark cave, and one day you went outside the cave and saw trees and sunshine and grass and the stars at night and had this very different experience, and then you went back to the cave and you had to explain it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was actually sort of the analogy I was thinking about earlier when talking about trying to explain these things to skeptics. It's sort of like, well, how do you explain to a blind person what the color red is?
Right.
Like they just until they experience it themselves, there's nothing that you could tell them. Like, I'll never understand what an NDE is like, truly, unless I have one. And it's hard for me to explain my out-of-body experiences to people, because it's like, well, unless you've had one, like, you don't really... Nothing I can tell you is going to match the actual experience.
And the thing with an NDE, too, I mean, is that what actually happens when we die, or is that only what happens when we're going to come back?
Yeah, and you're right. There's no way that you can know for sure. Although it feels like that's what it is, but you're right. There's no way you can really know until you can't write about it anymore or tell anyone.
Well, we're always asking ghosts like what it's like on the other side. Maybe we should ask them, how did you get to the other side? What was going on in your way there?
Well, and Keel said something about that, and he said that they never really give us anything useful.
Mm-hmm.
Like when you look at all this information that comes through, whether it be from aliens or seances and stuff, the information is almost always useless.
So do you think like the information, like the Seth material, do you think it's useless?
That's different though. That's what stood out to me, because the Seth
Mm.
material was so specific,
Mm.
and it's so off from what you normally get.
Yeah, although there's stuff like, was it the Skoll experiment where they got plans to make devices that would help the ghosts talk to them better?
Really,
Yeah.
I don't know about that. Can you explain
Whoa.
that?
Um,
Now, which was the
well,
Skoll experiment? Is that the one where they tried to create a ghost?
no, you're thinking of
Okay,
the Philip.
that's the Philip
That was the
experiment.
Philip
That's
group. That was the
telepathy.
Philip group. Yeah. No, the Skoll one was a circle group, like a mediumship circle group,
Okay.
and that took place in a town called Skoll originally. Now I think they're doing it out of Portugal. They've started up again. But yeah, I mean they had it. It was one of those situations where they invited all sorts of scientists. They had 3 very serious investigators from the Society for Psychical Research. I think actually on YouTube you can watch a movie called The Afterlife Experiments that kind of has interviews with the scientists.
Hmm.
I mean, and I think Rupert Sheldrake was at some of these seances, and so there's actually something called the Skoll report that was written by the scientists and their evaluation of what they were able to document. And it's really fascinating stuff. I mean, it's a long book, like there's a lot of material that was done there. But yeah, they got different bits of information that was printed on film, like 35 millimeter film that was sealed.
Mm-hmm.
In a locked box during the seances, and then afterwards they would take it out and put it through a machine that would what do you call now? Cameras don't do these things anymore.
Develop
Develop film. Yeah, it would develop film. That's right. And there would be like writings and plans and different like pictures all over these these rolls of film. And part of it was plans for a device to help facilitate communication with them. And you can actually, if you go to the Rhine Research Center website, there's a talk on their website about the Skoll experiment, and they interview Robin Foy, who was the head of the mediumship circle, and he actually he gives an email for people interested who want to build their own device.
I gotta look into that too.
Do you know what kind of device it was? Like what the description of it was? Like what was it supposed to do?
I'm not entirely sure.
Okay.
But I just know it's supposed to facilitate communication. So
the reason I wanted you to elaborate on that was because that's extremely similar to the history of like John Dee and Enochian magic, right? When John Dee and Ed Kelly first started communicating with the Enochian, quote unquote angels, the first order of business was the angels teaching them how to make better equipment to talk to them. like giving them the alphabet and like the designs for the holy table and everything. Like that's really fascinating, because that's like I'm sure the Skoll experiment people weren't thinking about that, but it's really interesting that there's this group of spirits in both times whose sort of order of business was to provide technology to the experimenters to better facilitate contact.
Yeah, I would say that the talk on the Rhine Research Center website is the best one I've seen about the Skoll experiment in terms of going into that aspect of it. and they also get into the issue of why, like, the group shut things down very, very abruptly, and it was difficult to actually find out information about like, why they were getting these phenomenally great results in front of scientists, and then suddenly it was like no more, and it had to do with space aliens and time travelers, which seems very bizarre,
Whoa.
and supposedly people from the future using that porthole that they were developing to communicate and to influence the past in ways.
Huh.
And yeah.
Wow.
So anyway, so whoever they were talking to said, no, we have to stop this communication. And anyway, the whole story of that is told in this talk, and it's like the first time I've actually seen it all laid out there about how they're basically told that we're shutting it down now. And then a number of years later, they were told they could start it up again, and apparently it started up again.
And where was this talk?
Go to the Rhine Research Center website. They have a media library, and actually for anyone interested in this stuff, due to the situation in the world right now, all of their medias, all of their videos are accessible by everyone right now.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a special thing, just so people have things to do.
Wow. So definitely take advantage of that. That may be something you want to include, like in the show notes or for the YouTube video, Seriah.
Yeah. Well, you can just do a search for Rhine Research Laboratory. It's the first thing that comes up.
Okay, awesome.
Because I just did it. And yeah, right on the front page, it says all our videos are free.
Yeah, for the time being, which is great.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. And what what did you say the video was called?
Oh, I can't remember the fellow's name, but about Skoll.
Okay, it has Skoll in it.
Yeah, and I mean, and they probably mentioned that Robin Foy is part of the discussion because he does a video conference to answer questions.
Okay. Yeah, there's videos from Daryl Bem on here and a bunch of other stuff.
Yeah.
I'm not seeing that one, but I'm also looking very quickly too.
Seriah, I wonder what separates, because we were talking about how this channeling experiments, Cherylee gave a counterpoint, but I think I get what you mean when you say a lot of the information that people get from channeled entities is useless, or at least in the sense that the channeled entities a lot of times seem like they tell people what they want to hear.
Yeah.
And they just kind of they like to build cults, and they like to tell people they're the chosen one, and all that kind of stuff. And that they have,
and it's the same messages you get from the aliens.
Yeah, dire warnings for mankind, that kind of thing. And it makes me wonder if there isn't some kind of difference between that and, say, psychic questing, in which we know that people get legitimate results out of psychic questing, but as far as I know, most psychic questing experiences don't necessarily involve traditional spirit contact, at least in the sense of like seances, although I may be wrong on that. But from what I remember hearing, some different talks about this from what's his name? Graham? Who are I'm going to sound like an idiot now. The Greenstone guys. Andy and Graham, I think, are the two guys, but I can't remember Andy's last name. Andrew Collins. Yeah. Listen to some talks.
Andrew Collins. Okay.
Yeah. Listen to some talks with Andrew Collins and that group, like the Greenstone people. A lot of it sounded like dreams, prophetic visions, but not necessarily like channeling per se. And again, I could be wrong there. I'm not a super expert on the Greenstone stuff. There are people who know more about that than me. But I almost wonder if there's some difference between that sort of experience and the channeling experience, because we know with the psychic questing stuff that people really do get results out of it. I.e., they find treasures. They, follow this narrative that does lead somewhere.
Mm-hmm. You there?
Uh-huh.
Oh, okay. I suddenly got a lot of noise. Apparently Apparently that was Cherylee.
It was Milo. No,
Oh, I see.
Milo had been sitting on the chair, like across the back of my chair, and he hopped down to my lap.
So what you got to do is go to rhineonline.org, click on the Now the Videos Are Free, and 2 pages in, you will find the Skoll experiment featuring Robin Foy. I'm sorry, 3 pages in. So there you go. I can't directly link it because it's not set up to do that. So if you're interested in looking at that, you can do it that way. Are you two still with me?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, I am. I was muting myself so you don't hear my incredibly loud mechanical keyboard typing.
Okay.
What a deafen the entire listening audience.
Yeah, I don't know. The thing that stood out to me from the Seth stuff was that it wasn't like all the other channeled stuff. Seth didn't claim anything grandiose, and she had her own doubts whether or not Seth was actually an entity or just part of her, which is not what you get from most of the channelers who have these grandiose, proclamations and stuff. And a lot of Seth's stuff was pretty straightforward and grounded and has proved itself to be scientific as time has gone on.
Yeah, that's what I really dig about James Merrill's Changing Light at Sandover, because at no point in there does he really claim to, like, say, be a prophet, or there's some kind of like dire warning for mankind, or that he's a chosen one or anything. It's almost like some people just aren't susceptible to that kind of nonsense, Like if a spirit was to tell me that I was like the chosen one, I would probably laugh, No, don't even try this crap with me. But some people I think are just the type of person that's going to eat that up. Maybe that's why they have that contact in the first place.
Well,
and then you end up with Mormonism.
Well, but and it's like, that was one of the things I kind of liked with the Skoll experiment, was that they didn't take themselves, like, they didn't elevate themselves because they were getting these results. They just kept going to see what else they might get. And they brought in scientists, and they tried to really, have somebody objective come in to see what was really going on, rather than them making proclamations. And yet, like I'm seeing, there's one group in Germany now that is getting a lot of attention. And what's not getting attention is that there have been a number of parapsychological researchers that have, come up with some bad things about them, that there's some cheating going on. And the medium, I don't know him personally. I know some of the people that were in the circle, and it was a real disappointment for them that he kind of admitted that sometimes he cheats a little bit. Now there is something called mixed mediumship, where sometimes cheating will facilitate the real thing. Like, is it Batchador, I think his name. If you go on YouTube, you can find some of the table tipping things he did, where he would have a bunch of his students in there, and he would tell one to kind of do a little bit of cheating and say, "Oh, look, that's moving," and then suddenly things would really start moving.
Right.
But still, it's not very good when you're bringing in scientists to investigate things and you're cheating.
Yeah.
And then going around kind of pretending that you're this great guru of wisdom and knowledge, which like really, it seems like the medium suddenly started taking himself a little too seriously.
Yeah, and I think that it's hard, because you're totally right. It's hard for like a scientist to look at that and be okay with that. Looking at it from the perspective of like a practicing magician, it makes total sense to me, though, because I'm like, what else am I doing when I dress up in funny outfits and like wave a dagger around and chant words and stuff? It's like I'm sort of hoaxing myself, like I'm playing pretend, I'm LARPing, right? But then real things start to happen from doing this, right? But it's almost like especially with a group of people, once they believe that something is possible, it starts to manifest all on its own.
Yeah.
And it's like, in order to get them to believe it's possible in the first place, you might have to fudge it a little bit and get things moving. But it's almost like it's like cranking one of those old engines or something. It's like, you've got to get like started, but once it's going, it just keeps going.
Yeah. Well, and it reminds me of when I was at the Rhine Research Center the first time. I went out to dinner at a restaurant with a bunch of them, and we had the little pinwheel in the jar, and I was not going to do this out in public.
Mm-hmm.
But it was kind of like a very party situation, and they were like, "Oh, come on, just show everyone," because one of the researchers brought his wife and family and wanted them to see it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, okay, fine, I'll do it. But once I got that going, suddenly other people around the table were able to do it. And
That's awesome.
and really, and it's like it just kind of fed upon itself. This thing where, I mean, the pinwheel was just spinning like crazy in there. And some of them said, like, afterwards, some of them could do things like that for a little while, but over time they lost it. And it was like, there was that real bit of inspiration, like they all saw it, and it was like, it just kind of fed the beast kind of thing, where just we all, it's working, we all see this, and now we can all do it. And then after a while, it just stops.
Do you think that's because it's eliminating that disbelief, that it's like getting rid of the idea in their head that they can't do it, or maybe it's letting them know that it's possible, and by them suddenly believing it's possible, they are able to do it themselves? Or do you think it's a sort of Sheldrake morphic resonance kind of thing, where because you do it, and then other people suddenly know how to do it?
I don't think it's morphic resonance, simply because for most of them it went away.
Yeah.
And it has, and for me it hasn't. So I think and that's the difference. And even like one of the things that I found, that when I was with the Rhine Research Center, actually, it's almost like there's some part of it that kind of, there's like a lingering effect there, that the devices I used when I was at the Rhine, particularly the second time, they had gotten an Eggley wheel and put it in a little plastic case, and I was able to spin it inside that. And then after I'd left, they were getting other people to try just to see, and other people were doing it. And they were just telling them, "Oh yeah, this is one of the things, anyone can do this," and it was working. But after a while, it stopped. So for a while there, it's like something was changed in it for a little while, and it wore off.
Interesting. I don't know what that means.
Well, it almost makes me wonder what you were talking about earlier, about how you kind of build a relationship with the item, right?
Yeah.
It's almost like you inspirit it. You give it an intelligence, an agency, and
resonate with it.
Yeah,
well,
and maybe if nobody else resonates with it like you do, after some period of time, it sort of dissipates.
Yeah, and the other thing was that when I showed up at the Rhine, I had my own Eggley wheel and my own setup, and of course they want me to use theirs, and that's completely understandable, right? Because they figure you could be gaming the one that you bring, so we're going to have our own. But it took me, like, I could get mine to work. It took me like a day and a half before I could get theirs to work. Like, so two completely identical setups, and I could tell which one was mine just by how it felt.
That's really interesting.
Yeah. And once theirs started working, it was fine.
And that's like just the very idea that you can imbue things with energy.
Yeah, and there does seem to be, like, one of the things that I figured out is that if I could get it going, and spinning in one direction, if I manually like picked up the container and kind of made it go the other way by knocking a little bit, and put it down, and it should just continue going in the opposite direction because you've physically given it a force to go in the other direction. And I could like leave the building because they had me leave the building, and what the little spinner would do is it would stop, and then it would return to the spin that I had originally had on it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and it was like and it's such a consistent effect. I could do it over and over again, no problem.
Almost like training.
Yeah, like it wants to go in.
Yeah.
And it works if like does like I found if I used one hand it would go to one way and the other hand it would go the other way. And it works it works whichever way you get it going, from whichever side you get it going. If you manually stop it, it still wants to just keep going the way you originally had it going.
Wow. Well, we're just about out of time. You two want to stick around for a Patreon segment?
Sure.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I thank you both. Cherylee does not officially exist, so you can't contact her. But Wren, where do you exist online?
Yeah, if people want to chat with me, I do have a Twitter account. It's at liminalbird. I also have a Discord server called Lunar Cry, where a bunch of magicians like myself meet up and talk about magic and all kinds of stuff. And if you would like an invite to that, you can send me an email or contact me on Twitter. You can get my email address from my blog, which is at liminalroom.com. All
right. And technically, I guess if someone wants to get a hold of Cherylee, they can drop me a line and I can pass it along to her.
Yep.
Via Ouija board. All right. Thank you both.
Thanks, everyone.
Good to talk.
Where Did the Road Go is made possible in part by our awesome patrons. And for those of you pledging $10 or more, an extra special thanks. Allison Cook, Super Inframan, Tim, Lindsay Trebet, Stone Wilderness, Luke Osborne, Rob Drummond, Alex Whitcomb, Damian Tallman, Edu Camahort, Tactical Therapist, Janet Bunderson, 36 Dingo, Maria, Jennifer Campbell, American Rambler, Kevin, John Rutledge Foster, Eric Citron, Andy McNamara, Sasha Jorg, Matthias Sunby, James Lattimore, Sam Sheeran, Dominic O'Malley, Christopher Vaughn, Riker and Stark, Sean Cosgrove, Jose A., Roger Gonzalez, Craig Cicernos, Ray Benedetto, Linz Jackson K., Alfred Tuttle, Kevin Schreck, Patricia Giaquinta, William Lovelace, Mark Brady, Chris is a hot dog a sandwich, and Carla Mahoney. Thank you all so very much. You have been listening to Where Did the Road Go? This show is made possible in part from our Patreons, and we thank you and everyone listening for helping us continue this exploration of the strange. You can always find everything Where Did the Road Go related at www.wheredidtheroadgo.com. And thank you so much for your support.